It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon at the local shooting range. The sun was soft in the sky. The sound of distant gunfire echoed lightly across the hills. And most of the regulars were gathered in their usual spots. That's when she walked in plain clothes, soft-spoken. Not the kind of person you'd expect in a place filled with loud voices and heavy recoil. Her name was Amina. She didn't wear anything flashy, didn't boast, didn't carry any high-end gear. Just a simple woman with an old range bag and a borrowed handgun. The moment she stepped up to the shooting booth, whispers started. A few snickers. One man even leaned over to his friend and said she'd be lucky to hit the paper. No one offered help. No one offered encouragement. Instead, they watched her like she was some kind of joke. She took a deep breath, loaded her weapon, and fired. Her shots were scattered, missed the mark, and just like that, the laughter got louder. Someone clapped sarcastically. Another mocked her stance. And still, Amina said nothing. She just stood there, quiet, but not defeated. One of the instructors, young, cocky, and loud, stepped up and offered her a friendly tip, but it was clear he wasn't there to help. "Maybe this just isn't for you," he said with a smirk. Amina paused, looked around at all the smirking faces, then calmly reached into her bag and pulled out something no one expected, a black cloth. She folded it neatly and tied it over her eyes. A few chuckles turned into confused murmurs. "What's she doing now?" someone said, but Amina didn't answer. She simply raised the weapon again, took a breath, and squeezed the trigger. The first shot rang out, then another and another. The range went quiet, because what happened next, no one could believe. One after another, her bullets punched through the paper with a strange, calm rhythm. No hesitation, no panic, just precision. The crowd that once laughed now stood frozen, eyes locked on the target downrange. Amina didn't speak. Her breathing stayed steady. It was like she had done this 1,000 times before, only no one believed it because of how she looked, how quiet she was, how ordinary. But what they didn't know was that Amina wasn't just some random visitor trying her luck. She had history. Long before this day, she had trained in silence, away from crowds, away from cameras. Years ago, her father, a retired Army officer, taught her everything he knew. She never competed, never posted videos, never sought attention. Her skills were something she kept to herself, practiced only out of habit and love for the craft. After her father passed, she stopped shooting for a while. Life moved on. She focused on her work, her family, the small things. But something about that day, the disrespect, the mocking, stirred something deep in her. She hadn't come to prove anything. But when the mockery got loud, she knew she couldn't walk away without reminding herself of who she was. Now, with each shot landing closer and closer to the bullseye, the crowd began shifting. Whispers turned into stunned silence. The instructor, who once smirked, was now watching her with wide eyes, arms crossed, unsure whether to be impressed or embarrassed. Then came her final shot. A pause, a deep breath, and a single bullet that landed clean dead center. But she didn't remove the blindfold. She just lowered the gun, stepped back, and waited. The silence grew heavier. No one knew what to say. And just when someone opened their mouth to speak, Amina quietly asked, "Do I still need help?" For a few seconds, no one answered her. The silence was sharp, almost uncomfortable. Amina slowly pulled off the blindfold and looked around. Not with pride or anger, just calm/steady eyes that didn't waver. The same people who had mocked her earlier now avoided her gaze. The instructor, still frozen by the booth, gave a forced smile and muttered something under his breath before stepping away. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody clapped. It was like the whole range had been reminded of something they'd forgotten: skill. isn't always loud, and strength doesn't always look the way you expect. Amina placed the gun down on the bench and calmly began unloading it, her hands still steady. A younger woman standing nearby, maybe in her 20s, slowly approached. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" she asked, her voice quiet but full of curiosity. Amina gave a small smile. "A long time ago," she replied. Nothing more. The others started whispering again, but this time it wasn't in mockery yet. Was confusion, curiosity, and maybe even a little embarrassment. Who was this woman? Was she military? A former champion? A trainer? No one could place her, and that only added to the mystery. She had shown up with no fanfare, no introduction. And now she was the only one anyone could talk about. But the real question wasn't how she did it. It was why she had kept that part of herself hidden for so long. And more importantly, what else was she still holding back? As she packed her things, one of the range officers quietly watched her from a distance, dialing a number on his phone. "Yeah," he whispered into the call, "you're going to want to hear this story, because she's not just anyone." As Amina walked out of the range, the chatter behind her only grew. People exchanged theories, guesses, and wild stories. Some thought she was ex-military. Others were sure she had competed professionally under a different name. But the truth was, no one really knew, and that made her even more unforgettable. The blindfolded bullseyes had left a mark, not just on the target, but on every person who watched it happen. Meanwhile, the call made by the range officer had reached someone important. Within an hour, a black SUV rolled quietly into the lot. A tall man in a sharp jacket stepped out, scanned the area, and walked straight into the main office. His presence changed the atmosphere. He wasn't just some curious bystander, he was someone with authority. Rumors spread quickly. Some said he was from a government agency. Others guessed he was recruiting for a private team. But again, no one knew for sure. Inside the office, he reviewed the CCTV footage from earlier. He watched Amina's shots again and again. Slow motion. Zoomed in, frame by frame. He didn't say a word, just nodded slightly, like he had seen what he needed to. "Find out who she is," he said firmly, before walking out. Amina, by now, was back in her car. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, hands on the wheel, eyes lost in thought. She hadn't planned to be noticed. In fact, for years. She had gone out of her way to stay invisible. But something had shifted today. That old feeling of focus, control, purpose had come rushing back. She started the engine, unaware that a second car had quietly pulled into the lot behind. The driver inside wasn't from the range. He wasn't curious. He was watching her like he already knew her. And he wasn't planning to stay hidden for long. As Amina drove off, the second car slowly pulled out and followed at a careful distance. Its headlights stayed dim, keeping just far enough not to be noticed, but close enough not to lose her. Inside, the man in the driver's seat tapped a small device on his dashboard, tracking her every move. He wasn't from any agency or training school. He was from her past, a past she had worked hard to bury. And now it was catching up. Miles down the road, Amina's expression began to shift. Her jaw tightened. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel just a little harder. She had felt it, the subtle rhythm of a tail, the kind she hadn't sensed in years. She glanced at the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the same car turning whenever she did. Her instincts kicked in like muscle memory. She turned off the highway onto a back road she hadn't used since she was younger. The air grew still. Trees closed in, and the quiet tension began to rise. What no one at the shooting range knew was that Amina had once been part of a shadow program, something off the books. Buried under layers of clearance, she wasn't just trained to shoot. She was trained to disappear. But years ago, after a mission went wrong and names were burned, she vanished without a trace. The only way to survive was to erase everything. But now someone had found her, and it wasn't by chance. Back at the range, the man in the sharp jacket got a call. He stepped away from the cameras, answered in a hushed tone, and frowned. Said she was off-grid, untraceable. The voice on the other end replied calmly, she was. Until today. Meanwhile, on that dark road, Amina pulled over. She didn't reach for her phone. She reached for the small case under her seat, the one she hadn't opened in nearly a decade. The car behind her slowly came to a stop, and for the first time in years, she knew. Hiding was no longer an option. Amina stepped out of the car. Slowly, the night air cool against her skin. She didn't look rushed. She didn't look afraid. The case in her hand clicked open with quiet precision, revealing a compact pistol and a folded piece of worn paper. She glanced at it, briefly an old photograph. Faded, but enough to remind her why she disappeared in the first place. The man from the trailing car finally stepped out. He didn't carry a weapon. He didn't need to. His presence alone said he knew exactly what he was doing. Tall, clean-cut, but with eyes that had seen too much. "You've been off the map a long time," he said, voice steady. "We didn't think you'd ever surface again." Amina didn't blink. "I didn't plan to." He took a slow step forward. "They saw you today. They know you're active. That changes everything." She kept her weapon low, not raised, but ready. "I didn't come back. They forced my hand." "Oh, you think walking away again is still an option?" he asked, his tone shifting, less casual, more controlled. A long silence followed. Then, with deliberate calm, Amina raised her weapon only to set.